Millionaire shocked to see male beggar calm a crying baby on the plane with an unexpected gesture. The cabin was tight. Darkened overhead bins hummed low as the transatlantic flight cruised over the Atlantic. Mark Anderson, billionaire businessman, leaned back, eyes closed, soaking in the rare moment of peace. His neat suit, flawless tie knot, the subtle shine of his expensive watch, all symbols of a life carved by control and precision. But then, bam, his world cracked. A sudden, piercing cry shredded the quiet. Luke, his 3-year-old son, was inconsolable. Red-faced, trembling, kicking tiny fists like a storm trapped inside him. Mark's heart clenched, chest tight as ice. The air shifted instantly. Harsh glances slashed through the dim light from every seat. Muttered complaints bubbled up like poison. "Can't you control your kid?" A sharp voice hissed behind him. Another passenger glared over the rim of her glasses. The kind of cold stare that burns straight through your skin. Mark's jaw tensed. Luke was his whole universe, but here, on this cramped plane, surrounded by strangers, it felt like a public shame carved in real time. Desperation clawed at him. But then, wait, something strange happened. From a seat a few rows ahead, a small figure rose. Arthur Johnson, a boy barely older than Luke, dressed in a crumpled jacket and worn sneakers. His skin was dark, eyes fierce, with something deeper, harder. A life etched in struggle. Most would have turned away. Few would dare interrupt. But Arthur stepped forward with quiet confidence. No hesitation, no looking back. He crouched beside Luke and, with a soft smile, laid a warm hand on the toddler's trembling arm. The cabin fell into a heavy silence. Then Arthur began to sing, a low, gentle tune. Simple words, like a breeze rustling through dry leaves. A lullaby from somewhere real and raw, plain but powerful. Luke's crying faltered, his fists unclenched, eyes still brimming, softened. The chaos blinked away. Mark felt something stir deep inside, a knot loosening, chest unclenching. The impossible had just happened. A stranger, just a kid, calming his son with nothing but a voice and a touch. As the last note faded, the murmurs shifted, from disapproval to stunned curiosity. Who was this boy? How? Why? Mark approached. Words spilled out, cautious, curious. Arthur talked about numbers, big numbers, coding puzzles solved in his head like magic. About nights spent caring for his little sister because their mother was grinding to keep food on the table. A hidden genius in threadbare clothes. Locked in a fight none should ever have to face. Mark's mind raced. Chance? Fate? What could he possibly do for a kid like Arthur? But something stronger than chance was pulling him in. Hope. Responsibility. The buzz around them thickened, watches ticking faster, eyes measuring, judging. Arthur's future was about to change. New school, new battles. Prejudice lurking like shadows ready to pounce. And for Mark, an ambitious rival in the business world, was already circling, eager to shatter this fragile connection before it bloomed. Both standing at the edge of an unknown storm, their dreams tangled with danger. Could Mark's power shield Arthur from a world built on ruthless walls? Or was this friendship fighting a losing battle? The hum of the plane wrapped around them like a question unanswered. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important warning. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube has removed their subscriptions without warning. Just take a quick look at the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss out on any exclusive content coming your way. And while you're there, leave that powerful like that helps me a lot with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know all the amazing people who are part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact. Mark scanned the cabin, still feeling the weight of what had just happened. A bond, small yet mighty, formed between Arthur and Luke. It resonated deep, shifting the tension like a gentle breeze sweeping through a suffocating space. But just as Mark was about to ask Arthur more about his life, the plane jolted. A sudden turbulence grip. Luke shrieked again, terror igniting his tiny face. Mark's heart pounded as he swept a protective arm around his son, feeling the frantic pulse of panic all around. Then came the screams. A woman's voice rose up, jagged and sharp. "We're going down! Help!" She clutched her seat, eyes wide with unfiltered fear. The tension, once a simmering pot, exploded, a cacophony of gasps, cries, and muttered prayers filling the air. But amidst the chaos, Arthur stood as a pillar of calm. His expression steady, eyes scanning, looking for something or someone. Mark could barely process. Did he just see that glimmer of recognition on Arthur's face? "What's happening?" he gasped, instinctively pulling Luke closer. Suddenly the lights flickered, the cabin lighting dimming to an eerie glow. A chill swept over Mark, a spine-tingling sensation curling in his gut. He couldn't help but notice Arthur's gaze fixated on a group of passengers huddled in the back. Then it clicked. Something in the boy's expression turned ice cold. "Get down!" he shouted, voice slicing through the panic as he dove low. Mark instinctively followed suit, instincts screaming. A loud thud reverberated through the aircraft, followed by a rapid clamor. "What the hell?" someone yelled, and Mark squeezed his eyes shut, praying for safety. But through the chaos, clarity surged. Arthur's voice rang out with authority, different than before. "Everyone, stay quiet. It's not what you think." He crouched lower, eyes darting. And then came the revelation. A man burst forth from the back, wearing a mask, clutching something that glinted in the dim light. A weapon. Bile rose in Mark's throat. A hijack. His world twisted upside down in an instant. Relationships now distorted, trust shattered. He looked at Arthur. This brave kid in worn sneakers stood firm, fear replaced by fierce resolve. "Arthur!" Mark's voice trembled. How did he know? But the boy didn't answer. Instead, he turned back toward the figure, calm in the face of chaos. "You don't want to do this!" Arthur called out, voice steady, like an anchor in the tempest surrounding them. What was happening? Who was this kid really? Mark's chest tightened painfully with realization. Arthur, this boy who seemed to come from nothing, might hold more power in the storm of fear than anyone shared on this flight. "Stay away from him," Mark shouted, protective instinct surging. But before he could move, Arthur's expression flickered. Pain surged through his features, like a crack in glass. "I know you," Arthur shouted, words flowing out, reconnecting a thread that felt invisible but essential. "You left me. You left us." Time slowed. Mark's heart staggered, feeling shattered pieces of a past he had buried deep. A young life he'd forgotten, tangled in memories he thought were sealed away. An old life now unearthing itself in front of him, threatening everything he had built. Glimmers of his past screamed in his ears. Guilt, confusion, regret. Could he hold the future he desperately wanted while buried under the weight of his past mistakes? The weapon shifted. The world outside dimmed. Mark looked at Arthur, realizing the true cost of this moment. The boy he saw, the kid he thought was just a stranger, was undeniably more. A life he had abandoned. Darkness loomed. But what kind of darkness awaited them? The plane shook again, and Mark knew their connection reached far deeper than mere circumstance. At the edge of resolve, faced with a choice that seemed all too familiar, an impossible question arose. Would he continue to run, or confront the pain It had come back to haunt him. The plane shook violently, a monster tossing its prey. Mark's heart raced, reality slipping like sand through his fingers. "What do you mean you left us?" he gasped, panic mixing with confusion, his breath shallow. Arthur's voice was fierce. "You don't remember? You walked away, left us with nothing." There was pain in his words, raw and strong. Mark felt the room constrict, the air thick, almost suffocating. The masked man lurched forward, weapon glinting under the dim lights. Panic ignited. Hearts raced. Voices rose. "Sit down!" he shouted, frustration boiling. The fear in the cabin surged, bodies tensing like springs ready to snap. "Please, you don't want to do this," Arthur's voice cut through the tempest. Mark stared at the boy, disbelief carving deep lines in his forehead. How did Arthur know him? What had he done? More importantly, what had this masked man come to take? Time twisted. The man's eyes flared with madness as he glared at Arthur. "You think you can save them?" he scoffed. "You're nobody." "Stop!" Mark couldn't hold back. "Leave him alone. This is between you and me." The urge to protect filled him. Both boys were in danger now. The masked man faltered, a flicker of uncertainty. "You?" he laughed, derision heavy in the air. "You're just a coward, walking away while I took care of your mess." His words thrust deep like knives, cutting through Mark's facade. "Enough!" Mark shouted, feeling the tears bite at his eyes. The analysis of chaos around him blurred into a spinning whirlwind. But it wasn't just chaos. Something deeper was at play. "What mess?" Arthur pressed, stepping closer to the man, bold like a lion. "You've hurt enough people. Stop hiding behind that mask." Fear rippled through Mark as he realized who the boy was standing before. They were more alike than he understood. The world around him started fading, pulling away, to focus on the storm brewing just inches away. With a sudden shatter, the masked man lunged, and chaos erupted. The gun fired, a deafening sound that tore through the plane's tense air. A surge of movement, gasps, screams, but most shocking of all, it wasn't Arthur who fell. A body crumpled, the masked man's face twisted in horror. "No, no, no, no!" He dropped the gun, eyes wide as he turned toward the lifeless body sprawled on the ground. A woman, just a few rows ahead, took her last breath, too soon, too fast. Silence blanketed the cabin, heavy and suffocating. The storm outside felt like a mere whisper compared to the whirlwind inside. Mark's heart raced for a different reason now. System-shattering reality engulfed them, swirling around like smoke. "Mom?" Arthur's voice cracked, crumbling into pieces. "Mom?" The mask shattered, revealing the truth like a light piercing through the dark. This wasn't just a hijacker. This was a family torn apart by unseen ties, hidden truths. Arthur, carrying a legacy of anger and pain, was more than a kid in need of help. Mark staggered backward, the past clawing back. Choices made and buried, now floated before him like ghosts. His son in his arms felt small and insignificant next to the storm of emotions brewing between him and Arthur. Before he could speak, before he could understand, the plane jolted violently again. A tumultuous surge threw them all forward, breaking concentration. Fear knotted in the pit of his stomach. Everything felt lost. Relationships shifted. Secrets unraveled. And as they all gasped and scrambled, another shot rang out, piercing through the tense silence, echoing like a death knell. What was really at stake? With lives hanging in the balance, Mark realized every moment counted. Would the truth heal, or destroy them all completely? Everything spiraled, uncertainty swirling with every heartbeat. What would happen next? The plane shook violently again, and the air filled with screams. Mark felt his heart drop. The chaos was unrelenting. He clutched Luke tightly, his breath quickening as he caught Arthur's terrified gaze. The boy's face was pale, yet there was a flicker of something deeper, something urgent brewing in those dark eyes. "Arthur, what do we do?" Mark breathed. Fear clawed at him like a wild animal. He could see a soft determination rising in Arthur, a fire igniting behind the panic. "Stay low. We need to grab something. Anything." Arthur shouted back, his voice echoing in the swirling noise. He darted ahead, heading toward the aisle, where scattered emergency equipment hung. Mark hesitated, the weight of Luke in his arms weighing him down. But he couldn't let this child be a hero alone. He followed, sparking through him as they reached a small compartment. Arthur yanked it open and pulled out an emergency kit. But before they could process their chance, they heard it. A deafening shout. "You think you can hide behind a kid?" The masked man sneered, twisting toward them with mad eyes full of rage. "Get down," Arthur yelled, pushing Mark and Luke to the floor as he threw the kit at the man. It crashed into the guy's arm, and for a moment, confusion flickered on the mask. Mark's heart raced, and he seized the moment. This was their chance. "Now!" Mark shouted. They scrambled to move, but as they did, a loud crash echoed through the cabin, and suddenly the emergency exit doors blew open. The resulting rush of cold air blasted through the tiny cabin like an angry beast, sucking everything toward the void beyond. Mark's breath caught in his throat. Blank faces turned toward him, a moment of frozen shock captured in time. Then chaos erupted anew. Passengers screamed, clutching seats and one another, the ground beneath them shifting as they began to plummet. And then, a quick glance to Arthur revealed something shocking. His eyes widened, not from fear, but recognition. "No, not you," he whispered. And suddenly, Mark felt a twist in his gut. Before he could catch his breath, Arthur dove back, pushing his way through, searching for something around them. "You don't have to do this," he yelled toward the masked man, desperation clawing every word. The gunman let out a harsh laugh, but something shifted in his expression, hardening. "I never needed to, kid. I wanted this to be about your old man. You think I didn't know? You don't remember anything, do you?" A revealing pause hung in the air, and then the ground cracked open beneath Mark. He froze, disbelief clawing at the edges of his mind. "What do you mean?" But in that terrifying moment, Arthur lunged closer. "You were supposed to protect us. You just ran away." The masked man took a trembling step back. "I wanted to, but blood runs deeper, boy. Always does." His voice cracked like thunder, reverberating through the helpless crowd around them. Mark felt the floor slip away beneath him. Everything he thought he knew was crumbling. Who was this masked man? What connection did he have to Arthur that twisted their fate together like vines in a storm? In a flash, Arthur reached into his jacket and pulled something out. Mark squinted, seeing sparkles. No, not sparkles. Familiar charms that glinted in the dim light. Little numbers, coins, tokens. Mark's heart raced in recognition. They were tokens from their past, memories he thought he had buried. "You don't care to remember?" Arthur screamed. "This is your life too. It's all connected." The gun jumped back. Mark's breath hitched as pieces clicked together that he had long ignored. There was more tying them than he could see. Secrets folded into their lives like hidden paper cranes, carrying heavy words trapped in silence. "Enough!" Mark shouted, urgency washing over him like a flood. But before he could act, the masked man was suddenly on him. There was no more time to think. "You'll regret it. All of this was for you." And just like that, the ground beneath them trembled again, another jolt rattling through the cabin. The masked man lost balance, tipping toward the open door, and in an instant, he fell. A gasp rippled through the cabin. eyes widening in disbelief. Time stopped. Arthur stood frozen, staring into the void from which the man had fallen. Mark felt an icy chill sweep over him. The world outside loomed dark. But now, Mark realized, a piece of their lives had been buried, too deep to fathom, now threatening to resurface like a ghost. What secrets had they uncovered? What awaited them now with the past unraveling like lost threads? Would this revelation forge a bond or rip them apart completely? The air pulsed with questions. Mark knew everything had changed, but the labyrinth of truth loomed larger than ever. The silence that followed the gunshot was deafening. Mark stared into the void where the masked man had just stood, his mind racing. Arthur's voice echoed in the background, shouting for someone who would never respond. The cabin was in chaos, but for a brief moment, everything felt frozen. Then, the plane jolted again, and Mark's grip on reality tightened. He felt the cold air whipping through the opening, the howling wind a reminder of their precarious situation. Panic surged among the passengers. Screams and cries filled the air, but Mark was only focused on Arthur, his eyes wide with something deeper than fear. Pain. "Mom, please," Arthur's voice cracked, desperation spilling into the air like a broken glass. Mark's heart ached for him, but was also heavy with confusion. The tension grew, wrapping itself around him like a suffocating cloak. He had no time to think. Every instinct told him to protect Luke and get everyone to safety. Mark shouted, cutting through Arthur's turmoil, "We need to get everyone to the back, now." Arthur seemed to gather himself, nodding quickly. Together, they moved through the cabin, urgency propelling them forward. The rush of the wind seemed to claw at their faces as they shoved past terrified passengers. Fear was a tangible force in the air, thick and heavy. Then they saw her, the lifeless body of a woman, sprawled across the aisle, a seatbelt still tight around her waist. A familiar face. Mark's breath caught. "No," he whispered, feeling the world tilt beneath him. It was a woman he recognized, someone he had crossed paths with long ago, her eyes filled with light and laughter. "It can't be." Arthur's voice trembled, but the boy pressed forward, reaching for something amidst the chaos. A small charm slipped from her hand and landed at their feet, a toy car, bright red and worn. A sickening wave of recognition crashed over Mark. Suddenly, memories flooded back. The last time he had seen this woman, she was carrying her own child, laughing as they played at a park. He remembered her words, her warmth. He felt bile rise in his throat, choking the air out of his lungs, and then the truth shattered everything. "Your mother," he stammered, fear pooling in his gut. She was your mother?" Arthur's face paled, realization dawning in his eyes. "No, no, no, no," he screamed, stumbling back. "You don't get to say that. She left." Mark's heart ached. "I didn't know. I hate you," Arthur shouted, tears streaming down his face. "You left us all behind. You let her die." His eyes blazed with fury and pain, cutting through Mark's guilt like a knife. But before Mark could respond, a thunderous sound roared from behind them. The cabin lights flickered ominously, and the plane lurched again. This time, a spotlight from the emergency exit shone bright. Illuminating a figure in the aisle, the masked man was back, somehow still standing, pushed forward by the chaos of the cabin, face contorted with rage. "You think this is over?" he roared, and just as Mark braced himself for another round, a shot rang out, a clear, distinct pop that sent waves of shock rippling through the air. A flash of red erupted from the man's chest. He staggered back, eyes bulging with disbelief, and then he collapsed. The gun fell from his grip, clattering against the floor, and all noise seemed to vanish. The light flickered once more, and then darkness. Mark's heart pounded in his chest. the air thick with disbelief. Who fired the shot? Why did it feel like something had changed inside him? Like a veil had lifted, revealing a truth he wasn't ready to face. In the quiet aftermath, a singular question loomed heavy in the air. What was the real story behind Arthur's mother? What kind of web had they all been caught in without knowing it? And as Mark looked into Arthur's eyes, filled with a mix of horror and anger, he realized that nothing he thought he knew about this moment, or his past, was true anymore. They were all just pieces on a board, waiting to see who would move next. Mark stood there, heart racing, trying to grasp the reality of the twisted scene before him. Arthur's face was a storm of emotions, anger and G. Around them, passengers were wide-eyed, holding their breath, unsure how to react. Mark's mind was swirling. The revelation hit him like a freight train. Arthur's mother, someone he had known, had cared about, lay lifeless just a few feet away. What had he done? Memories flooded back, some warm and nostalgic, others sharp and painful. It pierced through the fog of guilt he carried, suffocating him with regret. But before he could collect himself, another loud crack resounded through the cabin, like a thunderclap. The plane lurched suddenly, and a new wave of fear slammed into their collective psyche. Passengers gasped, clutching their seats, some shrieking in terror. Mark instinctively wrapped his arms tighter around Luke. "Stay down," he shouted playfully, keeping his voice steady, though his heart was racing. He looked at Arthur, who stared wide-eyed at the chaos enveloping them. Mark saw fear morph into something different, something deeper, and then an unexpected twist of fate. The overhead compartments flew open, showering the cabin with bags and debris. In an instant of chaos, Mark saw Arthur dart forward, eyes fierce, focusing on something in the distance. "Over there!" he shouted, pointing toward the back of the plane. Mark saw it too, a hidden door at the rear, partially ajar, an escape route glinting amidst the madness. His instincts kicked in. "We need to go." But just as they started toward it, a voice behind them pierced through the chaos. "Stop!" a woman screamed, her eyes wide. She was standing, shaking her head rapidly, desperation forming lines on her face that seemed to steal the years away. "You don't know what you're doing." Mark glanced back just in time to see her stumbling forward, a small bag clutched tightly to her chest. She looked hauntingly familiar, like a ghost from another life. "You don't understand." Mark could feel his heart drop. Who was she? Why did she seem so important? Arthur shot a look back at Mark, eyes filled with dread. "That's my mom's friend. She might know." It clicked. Memories churned within Mark's consciousness. This woman had been in their lives before everything had fallen apart. Why was she here? "Please," the woman cried, tears streaming down her face, desperation spilling from her lips. "I know things. I know what he's planning." Before Mark could process it, she lunged forward, the small bag flying from her grasp. It opened midair, spilling its contents. Pictures, photos of Arthur with his mother, with faces he recognized all too well. But there was something else, something darker. In that moment, a picture slipped through his fingers, and his breath caught. It was a photo of the masked man, but he wasn't a stranger. Mark's chest tightened as realization struck him like lightning. It was someone from his past, a friend turned enemy. "How do you know him?" He whispered, voice trembling. "I was there that night," she yelled, voice rising above the rising panic. "I saw everything. It isn't what you think." Mark staggered back, confusion overwhelming him. He had kept so much buried, emotions so tightly wrapped. The truth began to drip out like poison into the already tainted well of his memories. He felt a knot forming, tightening in his chest. Who was this woman really? And then, the masked man reappeared in the doorway, wild with rage. Fury glowing in his eyes. "You'll pay for this. You think you can run away?" The cabin erupted in chaos once more, but as Mark looked at the thrashing bodies around him, he understood. This wasn't just about survival. It was about confronting the ghosts from their past. Choices made years ago were rising up, tangling their lives in an inescapable web. As the plane jolted again, Mark saw Arthur and that woman locked in a moment of understanding, the air around them crackling with electric intensity. Was she friend or foe? Had they all been pawns in someone else's game? With the masked man advancing and the possibilities cascading around him, Mark felt an unexpected surge of clarity. He could no longer run. The truths were surfacing like shadows in the night, demanding to be seen. What would happen next? Would they all find a way out, or would the weight of their past crush them completely? In that moment, as the plane continued to spiral into chaos, the only certainty was uncertainty. Would they truly uncover the hidden truths before it was too late? The air felt electric, thick with tension. Mark's heart raced, a drum pounding in his chest, drowning out. The masked man was back, eyes wild, and the tension was palpable. Arthur stood tall, defiant, but fear danced behind his bravado. Mark felt the weight of the moment. They were on the precipice of something unimaginable. The woman, Arthur's mother's friend, was still trying to explain, her voice trembling. "I know things. He's not who you think he is." But Mark couldn't focus. The masked man loomed closer, fingers twitching near the weapon that lay abandoned on the floor. "Shut up!" he shouted, and in a swift, shocking motion, he lunged forward, grabbing the woman by the arm. "You think you can ruin this for me?" Panic washed over Mark, shockwaves of urgency propelling him into action. "Let her go!" he shouted, horror twisting his stomach. Arthur shot a glance at Mark, a silent question hanging in the air. They needed a plan. They needed to act, and fast. But just as Mark moved to help, the plane lurched violently again, a massive shudder rippling through the cabin. It felt as if the very engine of their fate had come loose. Mark stumbled, grasping Luke tighter. The sudden shift unbalanced everyone. Just then, chaos erupted once more. "Look out!" someone screamed, and a piece of debris flew from the overhead bin, crashing beside the masked man. The distraction was just what they needed. Arthur dashed toward a nearby cart, fingers grasping the emergency equipment, his determination shining through. But the masked man spun around, eyes blazing with fury, and there was something else, something dark, flickered in his gaze. "You think this is a game? You don't know what you're messing with," he sneered. But in that moment, the woman spoke up again, her voice cutting through the noise. "His name is James," she shouted, anger mingling with desperation. "He's not just a random hijacker, he's your brother." Mark felt the world freeze. He blinked, struggling to comprehend her words. His brother? What was happening? The memories flooded back, fragments of a life long buried, revealing a childhood filled with shadows. Arthur's eyes widened with shock, confusion etching deep lines on his young face. "He's lying," Arthur growled, stepping forward, defensiveness rising from within him. "You don't know him." But before anyone could react, James lunged, and the cabin exploded into chaos. Passengers screamed, fleeing back toward the rear. In the middle of the turmoil, Mark's mind whirled. Brother? But that didn't make sense. The truth was too convoluted. It felt like a twisted nightmare wearing a mask. The air thickened as James pulled the woman closer. "You were supposed to stay quiet." "And you thought he didn't care," he spat, venomous. "You're the reason everything fell apart." Mark's breaths came in short gasps. "No, I didn't know." I thought you were—" His words choked in his throat. The truth hung heavy between them like a loaded gun. "Is it too late to care now?" James sneered, eyes darting as if searching for a way out. With the tension at its breaking point, the plane lurched again, a violent crash, and the cabin shook like a trembling leaf. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and Mark felt vertigo. He glanced quickly at Arthur, both aware that their lives had twisted in ways they could never have imagined. Then a loud boom resonated from the back, deafening, rattling every soul in the cabin. The plane tilted as chaos erupted. Mark shielded Luke, unable to tell where danger lurked. As the rolling panic engulfed everyone, he caught a glimpse of something burning near the back. Flames, real and wild. Panic surged anew, and it played in everyone's eyes, a primal fear suffocating hope. "This was never just a flight," James hissed, raging. "You brought this on yourself." And there it was, a twist that erased all certainty. The boy standing next to him wasn't just a helpless kid. He was a part of a nightmare Mark had tried to escape. Families, lies, and layers of betrayal unfolded like a deadly deck of cards, revealing that everything he thought was true turned on its head. In that moment, one thought burned clear. The past had returned, and it was about to claim them all. The flames spread through the cabin, threatening to consume everything in its wake. The dizzying reality of who they were and what they faced spiraled into chaos. They needed to escape as the wreckage of their lives fell apart around them. But could they flee from the ghosts that refused to perish? The air felt electric, thick with tension. Mark's heart raced, a drum pounding in his chest, drowning out the chaos around him. The masked man was back, eyes wild, and the tension was palpable. Arthur stood tall, defiant, but fear danced behind his bravado. Mark felt the weight of the moment. They were on the precipice of something unimaginable. The woman, Arthur's mother's friend, was still trying to explain, her voice trembling. "I know things. He's not who you think he is." But Mark couldn't focus. The masked man loomed closer, fingers twitching near the weapon that lay abandoned on the floor. "Shut up!" he shouted, and in a swift, shocking motion, he lunged forward, grabbing the woman by the arm. "You think you can ruin this for me?" Panic washed over Mark, shock waves of urgency propelling him into action. "Let her go," he shouted, horror twisting his stomach. Arthur shot a glance at Mark, a silent question hanging in the air. They needed a plan. They needed to act, and fast. But just as Mark moved to help, the plane lurched violently again, a massive shudder rippling through the cabin. It felt as if the very engine of their fate had come loose. Mark stumbled, grasping Luke tighter. The sudden shift unbalanced everyone. Just then, chaos erupted once more. "Look out!" someone screamed, and a piece of debris flew from the overhead bin, crashing beside the masked man. The distraction was just what they needed. Arthur dashed toward a nearby cart, fingers grasping the emergency equipment, his determination shining through. But the masked man spun around, eyes blazing with fury, and there was something else, something dark flickered in his gaze. "You think this is a game? You don't know what you're messing with." With the tension at its breaking point, the plane lurched again. A loud boom resonated from the back, deafening, rattling every soul in the cabin. The lights flickered ominously, casting shadows on passengers frozen in fear. And then, without warning, the overhead compartments burst open like a floodgate. Luggage flew out, some hitting Mark squarely in the back. "Get down!" he shouted, but it was too late. Shoving Luke behind him, he braced for impact, feeling the weight of the world crashing down. But then, the unexpected happened. A loud explosion ripped through the cabin. A blinding flash consumed everything, the walls quaking violently. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. Mark squinted through the haze, heart thundering in his chest. When the smoke cleared, A shocking sight met his eyes. The masked man lay sprawled on the ground, but it wasn't the explosion that had taken him down. It was the woman. She stood there, shaken, but the truth was clear as day. She held a gun in her hand, its barrel still smoking. "Get away from him!" she screamed, voice cracking with anger and pain. The revelation hit Mark harder than any physical blow. She had turned the tide. The very person who fought to reveal secrets was now their protector. Arthur staggered back, eyes wide with confusion. "You? Why?" The woman's expression twisted, torn between regret and purpose. "I had to protect him, to protect you both." Mark's head reeled. Protect us? From what? He felt the illusion of understanding shatter. Everything he thought he knew was now a tangled mess of lies. Suddenly, a smile flickered on the woman's face, as if she had been waiting for this moment. "You all deserve to know the truth," she said, her voice suddenly calm and collected. "You think James was your enemy? There's something more sinister at play." Before he could respond, she dropped the gun, seemingly spent from the emotional turmoil. It clattered to the ground, and she began to stumble backward. "You have to trust me," she said. Words barely left her lips, eyes darting toward the burning debris. The flames were closing in. The cabin was filled with gasps. Each breath felt heavier, filled with looming despair. "What truth?" Mark pressed, desperation gripping him. But then, in an instant, as if a dam had broken, the realization washed over him. Arthur's mother. "You're part of this too. You knew her." The woman fell silent, her gaze locked on Arthur, a mix of emotions swirling in her eyes. "I'm your real mother," she whispered, her voice breaking. Time froze as those words sunk in. Mark's heart slammed in his chest. Could it be true? Was this woman really Arthur's mother? The entire cabin felt suspended in uncertainty, the flames raging, shadows dancing on the walls. The truth spun like a tornado, scattering all they thought they knew into the chaos of the night. In that whirlwind of revelations, one thing stood clear. The connection they shared was deeper than blood, woven with betrayal, pain, and hard choices. What kind of storm was brewing now? Mark could hardly breathe. Was it too late to understand? Would they find their way out? Or was this the beginning of a fate worse than any nightmare? The air felt electric, thick with tension. Mark's heart raced, a drum pounding in his chest, drowning out the chaos around him. The masked man was back, eyes wild, and the tension was palpable. Arthur stood tall, defiant, but fear danced behind his bravado. Mark felt the weight of the moment. They were on the precipice of something unimaginable. The woman, Arthur's mother's friend, was still trying to explain, her voice trembling. "I know things. He's not who you think he is." But Mark couldn't focus. The masked man loomed closer, fingers twitching near the weapon that lay abandoned on the floor. "Shut up!" he shouted, and in a swift, shocking motion, he lunged forward, grabbing the woman by the arm. "You think you can ruin this for me?" Panic washed over Mark, shockwaves of urgency propelling him into action. "Let her go!" he shouted, horror twisting his stomach. Arthur shot a glance at Mark, a silent question hanging in the air. They needed a plan. They needed to act, and fast. But just as Mark moved to help, the plane lurched violently again, a massive shudder rippling through the cabin. It felt as if the very engine of their fate had come loose. Mark stumbled, grasping Luke tighter. The sudden shift unbalanced everyone. Just then, chaos erupted once more. "Look out!" someone screamed, and a piece of debris flew from the overhead bin, crashing beside the masked man. The distraction was just what they needed. Arthur dashed toward a nearby cart, fingers grasping the emergency equipment, his determination shining through. But the masked man spun around, eyes blazing with fury, and there was something else. Something dark flickered in his gaze. You think this is a game? You don't know what you're messing with. With the tension at its breaking point, the plane lurched again. A loud boom resonated from the back, deafening, rattling every soul in the cabin. The lights flickered ominously, casting shadows on passengers, frozen in fear. And then, without warning, the overhead compartments burst open like a floodgate. Luggage flew out, some hitting Mark squarely in the back. "Get down!" he shouted. But it was too late. Shoving Luke behind him, he braced for impact, feeling the weight of the world crashing down. But then, the unexpected happened. A loud explosion ripped through the cabin. A blinding flash consumed everything, the walls quaking violently. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. Mark squinted through the haze, heart thundering in his chest. When the smoke cleared, a shocking sight met his eyes. The masked man lay sprawled on the ground. But it wasn't the explosion that had taken him down. It was the woman. She stood there, shaken, but the truth was clear as day. She held a gun in her hand, its barrel still smoking. "Get away from him!" she screamed, voice cracking with anger and pain. The revelation hit Mark harder than any physical blow. She had turned the tide. The very person who fought to reveal secrets was now their protector. Arthur staggered back, eyes wide with confusion. Why?" The woman's expression twisted, torn between regret and purpose. "I had to protect him, to protect you both." Mark's head reeled. Protect us? From what? He felt the illusion of understanding shatter. Everything he thought he knew was now a tangled mess of lies. Suddenly, a smile flickered on the woman's face as if she had been waiting for this moment. "I'm your real mother," she whispered, her voice breaking. Time froze as those words sunk in. Mark's heart slammed in his chest. Could it be true? Was this woman really Arthur's mother? But before Mark could process it, the cabin shook once more, and a deafening crack echoed through the aircraft. The sound of breaking metal filled the space, followed by a piercing alarm. And then, an unexpected horror unfolded. The cabin started to tilt sideways, fast. The lower half of the plane began to split open. Mark gaped. The floorboard buckled, and passengers screamed, slipping toward the widening gap. Chaos erupted. Bodies collided, and the frantic cries turned into a chorus of terror. "Mark! Luke!" Arthur screamed as he scrambled to grab onto Mark, his tiny hands trembling. The woman leaned over to save them, but the force of the disaster pushed her away, sending her tumbling backward into the abyss of the unknown. "No!" Mark shouted, but the reality felt surreal. The space around him was splitting apart, both literally and in every other painful sense. The last thing Mark saw was Arthur's face, filled with disbelief and fear. Eyes wide, as the darkness swallowed the woman whole. In that fleeting moment, Mark understood everything they believed. They were caught in a web thicker than they ever realized. He turned to Arthur, ready to fight through the confusion and fear. But deep down, he knew that whatever the truth was, it was gone now, lost in the chaos. Was this the end, or the beginning of a horrific new chapter? With the ground beneath them torn apart, they clung to each other, waiting for what would come next, hearts pounding, minds racing. Would the revelations matter when the roar of fate took them far from their dreams? It was an uncertain plunge into despair as the aircraft continued to fragment into the dark skies above. The plane's cabin twisted like it was alive, rumbling and shaking. Mark felt the pull of gravity as they hung on the edge of chaos. Arthur clutched his sleeve, wide-eyed, while Mark's heart raced, each beat louder than the screams surrounding them. Dark smoke filled the cabin, mixed with the unmistakable scent of burning fabric and panic. Every sense heightened. Fear throbbed in his chest like a wild drum. "Stay close," he shouted, forcing his voice above the chaos. Luke clung to him, face buried in Mark's shoulder, trembling. This was not how a father wanted to protect his son. They moved toward what was left of a door, but nothing was clear anymore. Bodies surged past them, caught in the whirlpool of confusion. Arthur looked up, eyes ablaze, determination shining through fear. "We've got to help them." Mark wanted to scream, wanted to say no, but he couldn't. They were all connected now, teetering on the edge of a nightmare. "Back to the seats," a flight attendant cried, waving her arms as the chaos swirled. Mark pulled Arthur closer, fear choking him. Suddenly, they heard a roar, and flames leapt up from the back of the plane. Panic transformed into sheer terror. People stumbled, crying out in confusion. "We're going down," someone yelled, and the cabin erupted, a tempest of voices. "Breathe," Mark commanded, though he felt the tightness in his chest. He focused on Arthur's sturdy frame, grounding himself. "We get everyone out, together." But in the midst of it all, a figure emerged. James was back, eyes wild, but now the anger was laced with desperation. "You think I'd let it end this way?" His voice echoed in the smoke-filled cabin. "No one gets left behind." Waves of disbelief surged through Mark. "You're not saving anyone. You're hurting them." James's face cracked, torn between rage and something deeper. "It's not just about you anymore." As the flames rose, Mark felt a flicker of hope. "It can be. Stop this." His heart raced. The truth was spilling, raw and chaotic. Suddenly, through the smoke, a voice rang clear. "Enough." It was the woman, befriend, her eyes fierce, reminding Mark of why they were fighting. "We break the cycle now." The cabin erupted once more. Together, Mark, Arthur, and the woman formed a line, taking a stand. The fire roared behind them, but so did something bright. Hope persisted against the haze of despair. "Let's move," she shouted, pushing through the chaos, signaling for others to follow. People began to rally, forming pockets of courage amidst the devastation. Suddenly, a loud bang resounded. Something else exploded in the back. The cabin rattled violently, and several passengers fell. The world twisted as the plane tipped precariously, like a puppet on fraying strings. "Hold on!" Arthur yelled, gripping Mark tighter. In this raw moment, they were more than just survivors. They were a family, bound by circumstance, ready to face what lay ahead. With debris crashing around them, Mark kept his focus on Arthur and Luke. "We're together," he urged, looking into Arthur's fierce eyes. "We'll find a way." But the cabin grew darker and hotter, and the realization sank in. Time was running out. They bolted toward the exit, a path opening among the chaos. "Now!" Mark shouted, pushing against the wave of fear. As they stumbled toward the door, everything seemed to move in slow motion. He felt the heat on his back, the chaos of life and death surging around them. They barreled through the opening, falling into nothingness. Then, silence. Mark gasped, the world around him turning upside down. For a moment, nothing existed but the air rushing by, the weightless feeling swallowing him whole. And as they hit the cool ground far below, Mark held Arthur and Luke tight, relishing the warmth of their small bodies against the chill of fear. They landed safe, breathless. The world shifted slowly back into focus, the smoke clearing away. He turned to face Arthur. In that fleeting heartbeat, they understood. What mattered wasn't just survival, but hope, courage, and the family they had built against all odds. Yet, as fear ebbed away, another realization struck. The journey was far from over. The past would chase them, memories haunting them like shadows. Would they be ready? With ears ringing but hearts racing, Mark drew a deep breath. "Let's go home," he said, though the road ahead felt uncertain. But they had a chance, together. And before he took the first step forward, he knew he needed to tell you all this. You must subscribe now to the channel. Don't wait another second to get exclusive stories that push boundaries and thrill your mind. Hit that like button. It fuels the algorithm and keeps us alive. Flood the comments with your thoughts and predictions. I want to hear from you. And do not forget to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to know this ending. Support the channel. This is your moment. Your engagement matters. Let's keep this community growing.